Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do, sir.
You may take your seat. Please speak loudly and clearly.
Charlie, let's start with the most important question. Did you cause the death of Professor Dan Markel?
Absolutely no.
Did you hire anyone to kill him?
No.
Did you put any letters in any diaper bags of Katherine Magbanua to have Professor Markel killed?
No.
Now, before we get there, let's spend some time on your background. How old are you?
I'm 47 years old.
Where were you raised?
I was raised in Coral Springs, Florida.
When were you arrested in this case?
I was arrested April 21st, 2022.
And by the way, are you? How do you feel right now?
I'm really nervous.
Why are you nervous?
My whole life depends on it.
Where have you been living since you were arrested a year and a half ago?
Leon County Jail.
Growing up, what was your family like?
It was pretty normal. I was in the middle of 3 children. My dad was a dentist. My mom was a school teacher. Played a lot of sports. Pretty normal upbringing.
Do you have a brother and a sister?
I have an older brother and a younger sister.
How close were you with your siblings growing up?
My brother I wasn't real close with. My sister I wasn't really that close with either, probably until I got into high school. And we were probably closer in age and had more in common. And then I got closer to her as the years went on.
Your family growing up, would you describe it? How would you describe it financially?
I'd say it was upper middle class. And then in 92, my dad lost a lot of money. And then wasn't upper middle class after that. And then my dad worked hard, and he worked until he was 78. He retired.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to public school in Coral Springs. I attended Taravella High School.
Was school easy for you?
Not really. I mean, I had to work really hard to get good grades, and I really didn't get good grades until I went to college.
Where did you go to college?
I went to UCF in Orlando.
And after graduating from college, what did you do next?
I went to dental school.
Where did you go to dental school?
I went to dental school at Nova Southeastern in Fort Lauderdale.
After dental school, what did you do?
I did a residency in periodontics, and I did that at Nova Southeastern also.
Briefly, what is periodontics?
Periodontics is the surgery of the gums and bone, and it's 3 more years after dental school.
During your residency, did you work?
I did. I'd moonlight, and I'd work nights and weekends as a general dentist.
When your residency ended, what was your financial situation?
I had about $200,000 in student loans.
Now, after graduating from your residency, what did you decide you were going to do?
I started basically moonlighting when I was in dental school, and then when I got out, I really didn't have money to start a business. So I started working for just individual dentists, where I'd come in and do the surgery for them in-house, so they wouldn't have to send the work out, but the patients could still be seen by a specialist. So I'd travel from office to office.
When you started, and I think, when did you graduate your residency?
Graduated my residency in 2006.
When you started, how many offices did you travel to?
When I first started, it was just the first office that I was moonlighting in when I was in my residency. and then through an assistant that had worked there, she introduced me to a couple offices, and then those offices introduced me to more people, and it grew from there. By the end of the first year, I was probably working in, I would say, 6 or 8 offices.
By the time frame of 2014, when Professor Markel was murdered, how many offices were you working in, approximately?
Between 30 and 35 offices I would come in to.
When you graduated, where did you live?
When I graduated Perio, I lived in an apartment across the street from school, and then I bought my house I still lived in 16 years or 20 years later after that.
And that house is where?
On Whale Harbor. I moved in there in 2006.
Now, during this time frame of 2014, can you describe for the jury how far you would travel? In other words, how far were the offices apart from one another?
I never turned any work down, so I had an office as far south as Cutler Ridge, which is a little bit north of Homestead. It's a good hour and a half south of Fort Lauderdale. And then my furthest office I went to north was in East Port St. Lucie, which is a good hour and 45 minutes north of Fort Lauderdale.
Port St. Lucie is probably about halfway between Miami and Orlando. Is that fair to say, or closer to Orlando?
I'd say it's probably closer to Orlando.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, your typical work week, what did it look like?
I would work in usually 2 offices a day. I would start around 8 or 9 o'clock, work in one office till about 1 o'clock, and then I'd go to another office and I'd piggyback it. I'd try to be in another office that was in the same vicinity as the first office, and I'd just usually start there around 1:30. I'd have it where it's only a 5 or 10 minute drive to the second office. I would tell them I could stay as late as you need, and then when people had emergencies, which when you work in 30 offices, there's always someone that has an issue, I would come into their office. I would just say, just have an assistant stay, and when I got done with that second office, if it was 8 o'clock, 8:30, I would still go in and I'd work in the third office. So it was almost 2 offices on most days, and I would say 20% and 30% of the time there was a third office.
How many days a week did you work? And again, we're talking about the 2014 time frame.
I was working 6 days a week, and then I was still working 6 days a week.
Now,
And sometimes every once in a while there'd be a big case, and my whole week was booked up, and the patient needed something, and it was hours, and I didn't have time, so an office would open up on Sunday, and I would go in on Sunday and do the work.
for the most part, in your job working in these offices, what form of payment were you paid mostly in? Was it cash or some other form of payment?
The offices would always pay me an office check.
Now, were you ever paid in cash from these offices?
I wasn't paid from the offices that I work for in cash, but if I was doing a work on like one of the assistants in the office or a friend of the dentist, and the dentist didn't want any money to come to him, and I was doing it as a favor, I would say just go ahead and pay me in cash for the materials. And then the materials were expensive. Sometimes they were hundreds, sometimes it was $1,000. And then but the dentist didn't want to take any of the money from that person. So he was like, I'm removing myself from the situation. So the person would pay me the cash just for the materials for the work that I did on them. And that was really just when I was doing favors, and it was sporadic. Sometimes more than other, depends on the month.
By the way, backtracking a little bit, growing up, what profession was your dad in?
My dad was a general dentist.
And did your mom